Welcome to the ones already joined. We're holding on for a bit before we start.
Yeah, we'll give the other attendants 1 more minute to join and then start our conversation.
Exactly.
Okay, Maurice. Then let's start. So welcome everybody to our today's session, Beyond the Silos, the fusion of identity and fraud prevention. And I'm very much looking forward to having the discussion today with you, Maurice, about the silos we have in customer identity and access management, and or what we can do to tackle the challenges around it. So my name is Andri. I'm the CTO of IC Consult, and today I'm here with Maurice. Do you want to introduce yourself, Maurice?
Yes, please. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. Maurice Leising. I'm part of Transmit Security. I am part of the EMEA team, and I lead the technical sales team within the region. So I'm honored to be here and looking forward to having this discussion.
Great, thanks. So then, before we start, a few information about IC Consult. IC Consult is a system integrator in the area of identity and access management, completely focused on the topic of digital identities and identity-related cyber security. We are offering consulting services, managed services with more than 850 employees around the world. We are vendor independent, but always looking to work together with the best vendors in the market, vendors that have unique selling propositions. And therefore, I'm very excited to be here today together with Transmit. Okay, so before digging a little bit into customer identity and access management and the evolution we have seen there over time, what is evolution about and what are the drivers behind it? Obviously, it's a change in heritable traits with different generations over time. The important aspect is it is a response to a changing environment. And that changing environment, that's something I would have a look today together with you when it comes to digital identities for your customers. So many years ago, when we look how customer identities were used within the IT landscape, there was no centralized identity access management for customers because it was not required. Yeah. Typically, there was one single monolithic application, maybe an e-commerce system, maybe another service, and included in that there were the capabilities to register accounts, to log in, so authenticate users and processes around that. The change to that environment was an increasing number of touch points, mobile apps, multiple services, also correlation of point of sales in the physical world and digital commerce systems, and so on. And obviously, it is not an option to have the user to register multiple times, and also having a large attack surface. So then the second generation of customer identity access management were more or less a kind of joint database. Yeah? So applications were connected back-end wise to that database and making sure that there's just one account per user. A big step forward, but still the user journey is inconsistent. The user was not exactly aware when to use one password or different password, how these different services play together, because the user experience was different. Also, working with password managers was not working very well in that scenario, because there were a couple of login pages for every single touch point. Well, the results, of course, higher help desk efforts, but more challenging, a bad user experience, and still a very large attack surface. The weakest link in that kind of chain of different applications result in compromised credentials. So that was a kind of second generation. And then the next iteration take place, and that's where we started to talking about the customer identity access management. And what was the big difference to the scenarios before? Well, there was one customer identity access management in place in charge of not just registration, so the lifecycle of the user identities and authentication, but also additional capabilities like having a consent management in place and having a consistent user journey over all touch points with a result based on that, a reduced attack surface when it comes to the user account itself. Why? Because there's just one single system in charge of credentials, one single system which is getting the critical things like passwords, refresh tokens, or is challenging the user for other things like multi-factor authentication. Not part of that journey at that point in time, and it's the case, I would say, even for a lot of organizations today, is that everything related to fraud prevention, but also know your customer processes or identity proofing is very often handled in separate applications related to a specific business case. For instance, the identity proofing during the opening of an account in a banking system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but is that still sufficient today, or is it related with additional risks and challenges? So, I would like to step out for a moment and looking into a different topic, and that's the topic of generative AI, which drives a lot of us, I would say, since 24 months, more or less. So one area which is quite interesting is using Gen AI to imitate voices, voice synthesis. And I'm not sure if you're using services like Audible or Blinkist. A couple of audiobooks are today not spoken by a human being, but generated by voice synthesis services, and the quality is quite good. The drawback of the technology has been used in a situation in which a mother was getting a call and was 100% sure that her daughter was crying for help in the background. Was a scam call, but her daughter was not in any serious issues. It was really kind of generated voice used for that. And of course, Gen AI is not limited to generate voice, but it's the same for pictures and videos. So I'm quite sure some of you have seen The Mandalorian. Luke Skywalker showed up at the end of the first season, and quite impressive in year 2020, and looking like 40 years before, and not like the actor looked back in 2020 while The Mandalorian was produced. So a very great experience. Not so great experience in a CEO fraud We have seen beginning of this year in Hong Kong, in which a deepfake technology has been used for voice synthesis and video generation of the CEO in a live video conference. So not a lot of post-processing like for Luke Skywalker, but really live in a video conference. And that's really, well, impressive from a technology standpoint point of view, but of course also very scary when it comes to how to protect organizations against these kind of attacks. And this was a kind of POC, but this will be how to phrase it, POC with a 20 million pound fraud, but that will be that kind of easy accessible technologies for attackers in a very short term. And that then has a kind of challenge when it comes back to our customer identity access management, having in mind that very sophisticated attacks are dramatically increasing. We cannot just saying, hey, we are focusing on managing the identity for the customer. We have to build that together with the capabilities of fraud prevention and identity proofing, because we need these kind of capabilities in order to protect the digital identities and protect the business cases within our organization. And having in mind the expectations when it comes to user experience are today dramatically increased compared to 5 years ago. So bringing all these things together is quite challenging. Before handing over to Maurice, I want to share one approach which I would recommend you to look into. So first of all, we need to have a consistent customer identity access management, including these capabilities to protect our touch points against fraud, being able to prove the identity of the user when it is required. And that might be also in situations in which we are having not access to the credential, multi-factor credential anymore, and not just related to a business transaction. And very important having that kind of consistency across all the channels. That's something what the customer expects from one perspective, and from the other perspective, it's very important that it's somehow known to the customer and not having complete different experience than before, which also might give him a feeling of that he's in a fraud situation. So when it comes to your applications you're protecting, I recommend you building up a framework which might not be related to assurance levels as defined by NIST, where you really providing central capabilities to reach different levels of authentication assurance according to your needs. Also for identity assurance, because there may be services you would like to have just self-asserted user identities. In other situations, you want to have a remote verification or maybe also in-person verification of the identity. And same comes to the perspective of authentication. So how strong has authentication be in order to give access to the resources? In case of online banking, we have a very high requirement. When it comes to booking some services without any critical data, it should be more easy for the end user to access that. So establishing such a framework in your organization gives you the flexibility to always have the best fitting approach in place for the application, and not kind of one approach which has to fit for all your applications at the same time, because there's typically not that kind of silver bullet out there. What might help is, especially when it comes to identity assurance, you don't have to invent everything by yourself. There are standards out there like OpenID Connect for identity assurance that helps you to provide the data to your different applications according to regulatory requirements, standardized attributes, and so on, so that you do not have to define all these kind of things by yourself.
Yeah.
Well, now I have one question. So having in mind this kind of 4 generations of customer identity access management systems, how would you rate the system you are providing at the moment to your end users? So is this a kind of first generation? So how customer identity access management at all different touch points have different different user repositories? Is it that kind of second generation? So one account, but different touch points, different login pages, different places to create identities. Or is it number 3? So one central customer identity access management, but without know your customer processes, identity proofing, no centralized fraud prevention? Or is it that kind of fourth generation, having everything included, combined with an orchestration engine in order to react dynamically on the requirements of your business applications you're in charge of? So please, right now, I'm very excited to see the results. We're waiting maybe 20 more seconds.
Yeah, that's all that. People are still voting.
It's not visible who is giving what kind of assessment to his own customer identity access management. So be honest, there's no need to be nice to anybody.
No, we only see the statistics. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have something here. Okay, so let's share the results. I'm very excited to see that. Okay, so it should be now on the screen. So 7% have no SIAM system at all in place, but the touch points are individually dealing with that. 29% having the second generation, so at least one customer database with the credentials, but different touch points dealing with that. Then third generation is really the majority. So 64% having a centralized identity access management in place, but nobody with know your customer processes, fraud prevention, these kind of things in place. So that's exciting. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think that's a good reason to now look a little bit into what Maurice is presenting us about transmit security.
Exactly. Let me share my screen. Go. Good. Thanks for that. I think it's yeah, of course it's spot on, right? This is the history where it comes down to, you know, what have we gone through from a consumer identity management perspective? Where are we today? It's also what we've gone through. Little short introduction as to why am I speaking here and who are we from a transmit perspective. Transmit Security were founded a while back, right, and not that new anymore. In 2016, we got to market. We have a significant customer base, and we learned a lot when it comes down to, you know, how to deal with customer identity, but also how to deal with customer identity in some of the high trusted environments, right? Therefore, being able to see that, how do we protect them optimally, and how to work with systems that, you know, that are part of these types of environments, right? And you see a handful of customer examples that we put on this list. We kind of show you, you know, the majority of our customers today are still financial institutions. But we do see that the need for the types of solutions that we offer, which are the ones that are this cross section of identity and trust and risk and trust mitigation, right? So me dealing with fraudulent activities today, right? So just moving on from this, getting to where we actually left off just now. Right. So what you mentioned, and this is how we see it as well, right? We see that in the current day and age, we and our customers, right? When I talk about customers, it's typically our customers. They see like they have a single entity. They want to treat them as a unique individual, but they do want to drive the business and the interaction with those users, the customers, our customers, through any of the channels that the customers, they essentially the clients, they prefer, right? So they'll offer different interaction and communication and contact points, right? And this can be typically web and mobile, right, which are the traditional ones today. But still, right, call center and an in-store experience, they are part of this, right? And this unified experience, which you spoke about, right, being able to actually have an equal touch point and treat them equally, and at least offer them the same experience, certainly when it comes down to having to deal with how do they verify their identity, how do they actually identify themselves in any of these channels to make that a similar user experience. Essentially meaning that if you are using your mobile phone to generally authenticate to a service, why are you not able to, and you should be able to use that anywhere and in any other channel you would communicate, and certainly be recognized as that single unique individual throughout these channels. Also, what Andre mentioned before just now was saying that, okay, what we've learned across all these generations of tooling is that we want to have this identity, right, be crossing across any and all of these interaction points. Right? So we might be looking at onboarding the user originally. We will, right? Traditionally, this was a backend process. Nowadays, most of the services, they do allow for a self-service registration process. Creating an identity is part of that, but also issuing credentials inline in the process is a common user experience, right? And not just in retail, but predominantly across the digital interactions that consumers deal with on a daily basis. Then what we're looking for optimally is to also include this fraud prevention capability across any and all of these identity interaction points, right? And not treat them as we've done individually from an identity perspective historically, but make them part of this unified view that we have on the digital experience of these end users and the interaction through any of their channels, right? With the service that what retailers, consumers, banks, and the like are offering today. And then why are we doing this? And why are we talking about this threat landscape and fraud prevention? It's because we see all these attacks emerging, right? And why am I displaying it like this? Because these attacks actually, they focus themselves typically on particular interaction points with the identity in those channels and across channels, right? So if you look at it, and this is what Andre mentioned before, right? Generative AI has evolved in such a manner that new attack patterns emerge, right? Synthetic identities become way easier to create, much more effective, right? With a low cost to execution, therefore much more effective from an execution and getting to a result as well. This not only goes for the newer type of attacks, right, which include the deep fakes, like I mentioned, synthetic identities, but it's also true when you think about it, right, for malware, right? The way that attackers are now capable of using Gen AI to change existing malware in such a manner that they're still becoming very effective, and doing that in a very cost-effective and rapid manner becomes and is a significant problem, right? We see an emerging trend there in the market in general, right? And these are just several examples of the types of attacks that we see, and we see them, in any of the channels, right? And this is why it's so important to consider fraud mitigation of fraud across those channels, because the attacker will certainly go for the weakest link in the chain. They'll make sure that they cross a channel when your fraud capabilities is not capable of crossing that channel, and they will come back having obtained something to actually break through the processes and the solutions you might have in place today. Talking about this, right, typically helps to share some numbers, giving you a general idea as to, why are we talking about this, right? Because we're seeing that, it becomes easier, but where's the proof in that? So looking at several of these numbers, right, and this is a survey, it's a Forbes survey that's been taken, well, within 12 months back. It looks at why and what's going on in the market, right? And this is two numbers that come out of that survey, which say that, 57% of attacks on e-commerce sites were perpetrated by bots. And if you look at that, right, and you combine that with the number that 1 in 3 login attempts on retail e-commerce site was actually an account takeover attempt, then you see that, right, the sheer volume of attacks that are occurring, they happen because of the ease of being able to actually be super cost effective, right? Having the means to be able to drive this type of attack and these types of volumes, because we're talking about billions and billions of authentication requests, right, on services. Well, I would argue on a daily basis, right, trying to break through accounts in general. Then looking at the ATO in specific, right, and then you'll see that it's a staggering number on the top of the screen, that it's increasing significantly year over year, but most importantly is the second number. The second number actually displays that consumers, they are still trusting the brands that they interact with to keep them safe, right, to keep their accounts safe and to protect the credentials of the user. Right? The majority of customers do expect that responsibility to lie with the brand that they're actually interacting. Then it's not surprising that the latter number actually dictates that around 40%, 43 to be exact, of the breaches were actually notified to the account owner, which means that the majority of attacks were not actually, the account owner wasn't even informed of the fact that their account was breached, and typically some value was obtained, right? Because there's a reason for obviously those accounts being compromised. There is some value in it. Sometimes there is direct benefit. Sometimes it's stepping up, using that information that they gathered in the account to create the next step in a fraudulent attack. So what attacks are we talking about in general? And we addressed, ATO in a bit, but then this is another survey where you'll see that, in general, and this is a survey taking into account several merchants worldwide. You'll see that account takeover actually takes the cake. Is the highest number in the type of attack that they've been enduring over the last 12 months. Then if you look at the type of account takeover, this is a category that actually splits it across all the methods that are on top, but you'll see that phishing, farming, whaling, together with identity theft, are one of the highest account fraudulent attacks, let's say it like that, that occur in the interaction with those digital channels, right? And this is very much focused on a global view of the security estate. Then I'd like to give a quick poll because we see this nice and interesting view when it comes down to a global research, but I'd like to see what the view would be between the people actually participating in this webinar. So I'll launch a quick poll to see if there is any particular view that you have or experience you have when it comes down to the type of attacks. So let's see. And I'll launch it here. Take some time to actually read through it. So I've taken the liberty to combine several of these together to make it somewhat easier. And if you look at it, the idea is to say that what type of fraud has your organization actually endured or did you encounter or are you looking to mitigate? Right? What's the biggest fraud risk within your organization? So account takeover, identity theft. I see that. I see phishing, farming, whaling actually taking the cake at the moment. It's rising.
Mhm.
Surprisingly, oh, there's one. I was just going to be saying loyalty coupon and discount abuse. I was not ticked at all.
Mhm. But the challenging thing about phishing is how do you get aware that your customers are a victim to that, right? Because the attackers is dealing with your customers and they are not hitting your services at that moment in time. So I think that's really
Yeah,
kind of a thing we have why we really have to have good fraud prevention in place. Yeah, so kind of safety net in place.
yeah, yeah, that's correct. And we see this frequently also with financial institutions, right? And then with a fancy name, it's called APP fraud, where there is social engineering going on, where credentials are being compromised, but even worse, they're being coerced to actually transact on behalf of themselves, but being coerced by the attacker to do that. And
Mhm.
then, you'll have to have methods in place to be able to detect that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let me share the results. So I would argue that, indeed, phishing, farming, whaling is nothing to argue that it actually is the top contender here. Things that we do see and that this kind of matches, right, with what the global survey actually resulted as being the top fraud attack and pattern. Next to that, you see as the second account takeover, yes, as expected, payment fraud, and then bot attacks and loyalty coupon and discount abuse. Excellent. Thank you for participating. Good. The last, at least from a numbers perspective, before I actually want to show you how we believe in, from a solution perspective, you should think about breaking down those silos. But also important is how do you think and how do we see, but not only we, how does the market think about addressing these types of attacks, and what's the urgency that organizations actually push for getting solutions against, this ever increasing fraud attack on our customers' environments. In this case, we do see that 2 out of 3 of the specialists, and this is a survey done specifically to the state of AI and security. It's a Google issued survey. We see that 2/3 believe that indeed we should combat the threats that are emerging with equal technology, right? So use AI to combat fraud. We also see that a very high percentage, 83% to be exact, of the push for the use of AI actually doesn't come from IT. It comes from the business, the business realizing that AI is something to be taken into account and to be utilized as a tool and essentially in this case a weapon to arm the organization against the ever increasing amount of fraud, and not only that in general, right? In this case, to better the level of security of the environment, and therefore right, and improve the user experience, but also the usability of an environment as well. And the last number here is that the actioning, a lot of, and this is about half of them, have indicated that they actually want to do something. They're actioning and they try to do something in this year or beginning of next. And then we have 2 polls quite close to one another, but it's very interesting for me to actually see that. What does your organization? Because we've kind of looked at, there is significant, well, at least there are threats or attacks. You've seen them, but what are you doing and what is your organization actually doing to mitigate them? This should be a quick one. So are you actually planning on doing anything there, or maybe you've already done? right? If you already put controls in place to be able to mitigate, or you're looking at doing something, but there's nothing planned just yet, or there's a target date. Or you're thinking that, hey, this is still a very good opportunity. We should go and investigate what we can actually do here.
So making sure that we on the good side are also using that kind of very exciting technology to getting more efficient when it comes to prevent fraud and not just that the
Exactly.
attackers getting more efficient.
Yeah, because it is, and it's always been a cat and mouse game. Now there are new tools that are readily and easily available, right? Even at no cost or low cost, which are equally as available to organizations. It just means that organizations have to make use of them. And it does mean that typically you might have to reevaluate how you do things today to be able to best use these tools.
Absolutely. Because I think what was really kind of very obvious, how good the quality of phishing mails is compared to 1 year ago. Tools like GPT really optimized of generating good phishing mails. So that's having complete different impact than that kind of phishing mails with a couple of typos in it, bad quality. But now it's really excellent. And also, of course, there's a landing pages after you.
It's pretty anecdotal, right? There's this story, and this is I won't name the country, not to offend anybody, but that countries that were pretty free from phishing before are now being attacked. Why? Because it becomes so easy to create convincing emails and easily having them be translated. And then, it's searching the weakest point because the controls have historically not grown that much in those countries just yet. And these are the things we do see happening. Like you said, right? It's if we now see a user or a phishing email with typos in it, we are that's not the most sophisticated attacker today.
Exactly.
So thank you for responding. I'll share it. It's a split between two. The majority is still doesn't do anything actively just yet, and there are several that are actually taking action, but haven't concretely planned anything or planned any action today. But everybody is aware, right? At least certainly it is something that needs to be taken into account. It needs to be taken seriously. And this is what we've seen as well, right? We historically we come from a financial institution which has always been under scrutiny by the regulator. There's a high compliancy requirement. Therefore, we've always been at the top of having to deal with all these technologies. Like I mentioned before, we do see the same types of requirements addressed, or maybe addressed and verbalized differently coming into other types of verticals where retail is a very prominent one, right? Because not only is it a big risk, it's also a drain on resources when it comes down to all these attacks and all the resources that takes away from those organizations. Okay, thank you for participating. Then we've talked about, and the title is breaking down essentially the silos between identity and fraud. So why are we saying that, right? And I think we've hinted to that during this talk, but I wanted to visualize that as well, right? Because essentially we are talking about two domains within an organization, two domains which essentially also have the same goal and the same interaction points, right? Most organizations, they have a team that deals with identity. The identity team that drives responsibilities around onboarding of the identity login. They have tools in place to be able to do that efficiently, and they keep them up to date, and they make sure that they drive this process to a T to improve and to have the best user experience. Then next to that, we have the fraud risk and compliance team. They are also there, and the obligation is to actually drive through the same interaction points. Obviously, it broadens as well, but they also deal with the same interaction points. Then they have different tooling to do the bot detection, behavior biometrics, transaction monitoring, if at all, right? Because obviously there's also organizations that might not have these toolings in place just yet. But this is what we typically see. There's siloed parts of the organization dealing eventually with the same type of user journey, and also having the same type of goal, which is protect the organization and its customers. What we're saying is that what you need to be doing is breaking down the silos between these organizations. It doesn't mean that you'll have to merge the teams and go through a big reorganization of your organization. No, it just means that make sure that given the fact that everybody's dealing with the same interaction points, that they have the same visibility, they're working with the same tools, so you can leverage from each other's expertise, and you can drive the best user experience, but also protect your customers to the best extent. Because if you don't, it essentially means that you'll drive up cost. Because this is what we've seen so far, right? Because of the ever increasing attack rate right now, and the willingness and the realization of organizations that they need to do something. They will need to actually act, and they are acting, right? It does mean that for them it means change. It means change. It means responses. It means changes in APIs, in tooling, and they continuously do that. It also means that their current organizations are running a little bit behind, because they will put in the change when they see the urge and the need, and continuously, like it's a less optimized ecosystem. Let's say it like that, right? It's a less optimized process, which could be better by essentially working better together. It's also hurting the customer experience. Because while these controls are typically in place that could say that, okay, we have detected fraud, the first reaction that we see a lot of the time is that, okay, let's block it. Let's block the user, which means that we're stopping interacting with the user. We stop having the user, giving the capability to the user to transact. Not only that, we go out of the channel, we go into another channel, and we try to mitigate, either by reaching out to the user directly, or through connecting with them through a different matter, or trying to get to a certain point of trust again to be able to lift this restriction, right? Which is the counter opposite of what we're trying to do, because we're actually trying to just have the user go through their flow without having to endure any friction, or at least unnecessary friction. Because users that are out of their comfort zone, and the reason that you might be challenging them is because you've detected that they're out of their normal zone, which could be they're actually transacting from somewhere else, they do expect to be introduced with some friction, right? So that's why it's always looking at the optimal user experience for the user, and the optimal user experience typically is not to be blocking them. Because that will just create a lot of friction, and eventually, depending on how sensitive your business is, it can lead to customer attrition and brand damage. And then, in combining these two a little, it's more flexibility. Having broken down these silos allow you to actually change processes when it comes down to identity much more easy, right? Because you don't have to deal with the fact that, hey, if I change this, the fraud system also needs to change, which means that you have long change process and long change cycles. This is then, I would say, obviously, what we aim to address when it comes down to transmit. What our aim is to create a fusion between the both, right? We believe that if you have a single platform that's capable of driving and driving the use cases, both from an identity perspective as well as from a fraud perspective, then you're able to combine and create optimal process together with working with the different sets of capabilities of your both the identity and the fraud team, and combining tooling. So everybody's looking at the same type of data. So how do we do that? We do that by offering a platform. right? And this platform consists of essentially a couple of foundational layers. We have a platform that has a fraud and detection and response layer, which is underpinned through anything the platform does, right? So independently of the identity journey that's being executed, this fraud detection and response layer actually runs and will collect and continuously evaluate what's going on. It will also be allowed to dynamically change the journey when so needed. So if fraud is being detected, and this can be anything from a change of IP, it can be something, a man in the middle, it can be anything. We will be able to then, prompt and in the user experience, drive the user through an alternative flow, mitigating that type of fraud. And how do we do that? We do that by employing our identity orchestration engine, which essentially is a process flow engine, which is capable of taking the signals coming out of a fraud detection layer and then using that to drive this user experience according to a process model that you, as an organization, have actually dictated. Because processes and how a user goes and what the interaction process of a user is within your environment, that's your process, right? And you'll be able to model that. What we're capable of giving you is the control to drive it and to drive it always with the lowest level of risk and the lowest level of friction, therefore the optimal user experience. On top of that, we provide, data insights, because if you can, as you can imagine, right? I know in any and all of these channels, because I'm continuously talking about, being able to do this for all channels, you'll see that there's so much information that we're gathering, and that provides so much visibility as to who are your users, how are they interacting with your systems, what is the change, what is the behavior of a typical user of your systems, and then take all of that information and make it visible, make it accessible. You can query the data, you can get gain a lot of insights to all of that, identity and fraud related data. And then last but not least, it's addressing this and doing this with cross-functional teams, right? Making sure that you work together through a single view with a single data set with both your identity and with your fraud teams to make sure that you have the system running as optimally as possible. Example here is that if there is a detection and we've blocked or we've actually we've somehow been sidelining the user, you can have a task be assigned to somebody to evaluate whether this was truthfully or whether we should have done that, and then the system can learn from the response, right? So if task is being evaluated, we will take that information back into the system. We'll learn, and the next time around, we'll be improving. This is the way that we actually learn how your customers behave, what your risk appetite is, or how to drive best and how to optimize this user experience within your environment. So what are we getting to at this point? We're getting to the fact that we want to actually prevent the fact that that you are reactive. We want to make sure that instead of being reactive, being able to actually mitigate and address fraud at the end will allow you to actually do that continuously throughout the interaction of the user in any identity. Essentially action, the task, which could be anything, right? From authentication to transacting in an environment, and then be able to drive that and optimize this from a risk and fraud perspective. Then why and how? To gain you and to give you the benefits that I addressed before, right? To make sure that we reduce the risk with giving you all the insights that the system provides. We're making sure that we proactively address fraud instead of reactively, meaning that we can do this real time, and therefore, right, you can continuously resolve this as well as quickly as possible by even if there are outliers, that you're capable of actually having somebody evaluate them quite quickly and then mitigate and then learn as well. By doing this, we allow for ease of change, therefore easily allowing new types of use cases to be rolled out, and therefore always having the level of security and confidence that you would need. Also improving the user experience in general, right? And therefore increasing loyalty and trust within the interaction with your systems, especially with your brand. And then we, because this is a platform and we will combine it, and let me say this as well, right? It is a platform that we provide, but we are obviously we recognize that we're never getting into a greenfield situation. So we're definitely capable of interacting with existing systems and services as well, but we're still able to leverage those capabilities to drive, this experience and to give you the same benefits, even though some of the components of the platform that I might have shown you today, you might have already have. We will be able to treat them natively and still provide you with all the benefits. Therefore, we'll drive business agility, but also cost optimization and operational efficiencies because we can leverage your existing environments as well within that. That's it from at least what I wanted to share about how we see this. How do we see the fraud and the identity fraud within environments? What do we see from a market perspective? So what are the current numbers, right? And why should you be acting? But also, what is the market doing today on acting? And then how can you act, right? So what would you be doing, and what would have to be your focus? In today's session, what we try to get across is focus on reducing the silos, breaking down and looking at fraud as being part of your identity and part of your identity program solution, right? And not see it as individual solutions, but treat it holistically as part of it.
Yeah, Maurice, thanks a lot. I think it was very exciting, especially getting also kind of insights into the numbers, what researchers see out there happening. There are some very, I would say, kind of hey, we are mainly here in Europe, and they're just 43% of the users are informed about an account takeover. That's really well, incredible. But anyhow, you have now the opportunities to ask questions to us. So we are here for a few more minutes. So please send questions to us so that we can pick them up and discuss about that. So we already have a couple of questions here. Let's pick maybe this one. So, do we need to replace our existing authentication methods and fraud systems? Maurice, I think that's going especially into the direction of transmit security. So, can you offering parts of it, or is it always a complete replacement of everything customers having for fraud and identity?
No, it would be crazy if we would say that, right? You have to rip and replace. We're definitely not saying that. The system we provide is very modular because we do believe in the fact that you keep whatever works for you today, and you've invested in, and your users are comfortable with. We do believe that the platform gives you the flexibility to do to consolidate, but also to eventually to grow, right? To disconnect and move and use different types of methodologies. So no, you don't have to rip and replace. We can take existing fraud signals and use them in the platform. We can use existing authentication systems, identity stores, whatever you have in place today. But good question.
Yeah, we have another very exciting question here. It is about passkey. So is passkey not solving most of the discussed challenges around fraud prevention, identity verification? So first of all, what is passkey? Passkey is a approach of providing FIDO2 based authentication. So something you have. In that case, it mainly refers to your mobile phone or your notebook combined with biometrics or knowledge, so a PIN or a fingerprint or face recognition and so on. Yeah? And Also part of passkey is that this credential, which mainly lives on your phone or notebook, can be roamed via your cloud account, Apple ID, Microsoft account, Google account, uh, over all your devices. So that's approach, and it's phishing resistant. So it's very hard for an attacker to bypass it somehow. So it's solving the challenges. So I have a few thoughts on that, and Maurice, I'm sure you have that as well. So first of all, I'm quite sure that passkeys are not the main priority of an attacker to bypass it right away because, well, it's strong, it's new, but first of all, the attacker is going for the weakest, for the weaker victims, so the victims
Yeah.
that do not have enrolled it yet. The other point is you still have to have a process in place in case your user is not able to access his passkey anymore. In theory, Apple or Microsoft or Google can take care about that, but only if the user is using that feature. And then the question is the security level, Google, Apple, and Microsoft or other passkey providers, there are more out there nowadays, is that high enough to fulfill your regulatory requirements? So that's an open question, because you do not have any attestation around that yet. So I would say it's an absolutely good thing to do passkeys. Anyhow, it's not solving all the challenges right away, unfortunately. Maurice.
No, I agreed. And we get this question quite frequently, that customers, because it is something that, the customers, pretty much everybody has today, at least the capability to be using passkeys, and it's moving away. And this is what it's meant for originally, moving away from passwords, right? So it's phishable credentials, unphishable credentials, essentially, right? That's what it's put in place for. But yeah, re-enrollment, rebinding, these challenges remain. Things like identity verification and document verification are elements we typically see when rebinding needs to occur, right? And not just with passkeys, but in general, right? Device forgotten flows where you can't transfer trust between devices. That's where identity verification also prevails.
Absolutely. Well, so there are a couple of more questions, but unfortunately, I think we are running out of time.
Excellent.
But please feel free to reach out to Maurice or to myself after the webinar via LinkedIn or whatever, and let's then have follow-ups on the points you would like to bring up, or comments, or further questions. So then, thank you very much, Maurice. Thank you very much to the audience for contributing, bringing up your current situation in the polls, bringing up good questions, and listening to us.
Excellent. Thanks, Andre. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care and goodbye.
Take care.